um, I had planned on going through Ezra, but when I got back and started laying these things out again, I can't get to Ezra before I go through Esther, and I'm not ready to go through Esther yet. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about in and out of the land. In and out of the land. I want to go all the way back to Abraham and look at what he was told, and I want to pay attention to how the Israelites ended up in Egypt, how they got out of Egypt, what they went through to get to the land, and how they got into the land. And the reason that that's so important is because we're coming up on another time, once I get through Esther, Ezra, and Nehemiah, of them going back into the land. We're going to talk about that today too. And then we're going to look at what happened in 1948 and how does that relate to either one of these entries into the land, and how are we expecting to enter the land when the kingdom is introduced. So we're going to go through that. It's going to be an open discussion. I've got a lot of bullet points. I'm hoping to just discuss this and refresh everybody's memory. You guys are all aware of this. But I want to start out with Abram and him being told that his descendants are going to be strangers in a land that's not their own, and they're going to be afflicted in that land. So in Genesis 15, 12 through 14, we read, "Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him." What was going on in this passage? Genesis 15, yes, that's right. The animals were split and the covenant was being made, right? Okay, so this part right here says he was in a deep sleep fell upon him. And when the covenant was made, he was still asleep, right? Make a little check mark of that. It was Yah that made that covenant and held it upon himself. All right. Then he said to Abram, "Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that's not theirs, and they will serve them, and they will afflict them for 400 years. And also, the nations whom they serve, I will judge. Afterward, they shall come out with great possessions." So, as I bullet point my way through this, I'm going to tell you that, I'm going to remind you, I don't think I'm telling you guys anything you don't already know. Abram becomes Abraham, and he begets Isaac. Isaac begets Jacob, and Jacob begets Joseph and his brothers. We're going to go fast through this. Joseph and his brothers end up down in Egypt because, first Joseph's brothers sell him, and Joseph ends up down in Egypt, and the famine comes, and the brothers are drawn down to Egypt for food. Yah had preserved Joseph, and Joseph is proven to be alive, revealing himself to his brothers. They go back and tell Jacob, and Jacob and the rest of the family come down to Egypt, and they're in Goshen. A type of protection was taking place. Yah was protecting that family that went down is 70-ish. That family went down, and they're going to come out as a nation. Jacob and the rest of his family relocated to Egypt. Things go well for about 30 years, but then a Pharaoh arises that didn't know Joseph, and that's when that affliction that Yah talked about starts taking place. Okay? The Israelites are afflicted for 400 years, and I'm going to insert something here that's 400 years that they didn't hear from Yah. Okay? They had their things going on within Goshen, as families, as tribes, but there wasn't a lot of movement by Yah's hand at that point, other than, the fact that they were in Goshen. So it was kind of like a 400 years of silence. Now I'm saying it that way because I'm going to bring it up again in a little bit and tie these back together. All right. We talk about patterns all the time. This is a little bit different, and I think you're going to find it interesting when we get there. All right. So after that 400 years of affliction, Yah remembers his word to Abram. He's not remembering because he's forgotten. He's acting upon what he said was going to happen. Moses is born, and he ends up raised in Pharaoh's household. He ends up going out and seeing his Israelite families getting abused and afflicted, and he ends up killing that Egyptian and then fleeing. Yah meets Moses in the desert. He makes him a prophet. That prophet is going to link to Yeshua. Sends him to Pharaoh and tells him to let my people go. And again, let my people go means that he has people that are his people, and there are people that are not his people. And the people that are his people descend from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In two ways, but I'm not going to get to that right now. Pharaoh's heart is hardened to the point where he loses his firstborn son. It took all that. The 10 plagues are there. He loses his son. And then the first Passover is instituted. That links to Yeshua too, doesn't it? Yah's people leave the land of affliction, and they leave wealthy. Wealthy because that wealth was going to turn into what they needed to build what Yah is asking them to build. So in Exodus 12, verse 40, we're reminded, now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And that's different from the 400 years that Yah told Abram. But like I said earlier, I think the first 30 years were going okay. It was 30 years into them being in the land that Pharaoh rose up that didn't know Joseph, and that's where the affliction started. So the difference between, there are a lot of people that tried to argue about this. It says 400 years here and 430 years there, and how do you reconcile that? Well, the way I reconcile is I read from here to here, and you find out that there is a time that fits just like that. So Moses and Aaron, they lead the people out of the land. Yah parts the Red Sea so that his people can cross, and the Israelites cross on dry ground. Something I'm learning, it is really fun if you have a passion for the word and you're reading all the time, to discover these little nuggets that Yah puts in the word. The Israelites cross on dry ground. I want you to think about Genesis 1 at this point. It's almost like it's kind of like a little bit of a reset, or better, probably a reminder back to creation and the work that Yah did in the beginning. Because that dry land, the water was moved. You go back to Genesis 1, the dry land came out of the water, huh? Okay? So the dry land is representative of Yah's working, Yah's hand working. All right? So they cross on the dry ground, and then Yah returns the sea and drowns the Egyptian army. Yah leads Moses and the Israelites to Mount Sinai. Remember, he told him when he sent him into Pharaoh, he said, you will worship me on this mountain. And sure enough, that's where he brought him back to. Side note. Nope, I don't want to break the pattern. I don't want to break the pace, okay? Remind me at the end, the side note of Mount Sinai, okay? All right. Now, interesting, The glory of Yah descends upon the mountain. This is going to be important in the entries into the land, okay? And what's going on, his glory is significant. Now Moses meets with Yah on the mountain. Yah gives him the 10 words. While he's doing that, Aaron is keeping the people at the base of the mountain in line by building them the golden calf that they requested, right? That didn't work out too well. So Moses is coming down the mountain and he breaks the tablets and then he has to carve new ones, and he goes back up the mountain and he's given instructions to build the tabernacle and the ark. And the people stay right there at that mountain until everything is complete. And then as they move out, Yah provides bread from heaven in the wilderness, and he leads the people all the way up to Kadesh Barnea. There's 12 spies that go into the land. They spy out the land and they verify that it's just like Yah said it was going to be, flowing with milk and honey, and they bring the fruit back to show that it's that way. But yet 10 of the spies bring back a bad report and they discourage the people. And the people are assuming, oh, we're in this wilderness and our children are going to die. And Yah kind of straightens them out and tells them, no, the children aren't going to die, but the adults will. They're not going to make it through. So 38 years of testing followed, and then Moses and Aaron, they die in the wilderness. And then Joshua, comes up to the Jordan River with the people. He has been given the mantle or the torch, or however you want to call it, the leadership role from Moses. And he's going to lead the people across the river into the land. Now, the river's at flood stage at this time. And the night before they cross, Joshua meets the commander of Yah's army. And the next day, they cross over the Jordan. The priests step in the water with the ark. The ark, once they step in the water, here's another Genesis hint. Listen to this. In Joshua 3:16, it says this, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still, and they rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaretan. So the waters that went down to the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed opposite Jericho, and they crossed on dry ground. Here again, we have that dry ground signal, and as if that isn't enough, Yah is kind of tongue-in-cheek and telling us it goes all the way back to Adam. It's going all the way back to Adam. Well, what happened back then? We just talked about that. The dry land came up, all right? And the Israelites went across, and we know that once they got across, the waters came back down to flood stage. So, and the day that the Israelites entered the land, the manna stopped, and they began to eat from the fruit of the land there. Now, some highlights: 400 years of silence while they were in a land that was not their own. Okay? Yah raised up the prophet to deliver his people. The prophet brings Yah's people out of the land of affliction, and they end up in 40 years of wilderness testing. Joshua sends the 2 spies who bring back a good report, and they finally brought into the promised land. But God's people disobey almost immediately. They then battle on and conquer the land, and they drive out a lot of the inhabitants, but not all of them. The Israelites continue to be disobedient, and they go through idolatry. And so Yah divides the children of Israel into the house of Israel and the house of Judah. He gave the house of Israel into the hands of Assyria. He declared that those of the house of Israel were not his children, and he was not their Elohim, albeit he promised to bring them back to himself. Elohim gave the house of Judah to the hand of Babylon, and while in Babylon, Yah protects them. And we see that in the book of Esther, we see it in the book of Daniel, we see it in the book of Ezekiel. There's a couple other prophets in there too, but those are going to be the three main that we focus on right now. Actually, and it's going to be Ezra and Nehemiah. We're going to add those two in there too. He's taking care of all of them. And among them that he protected during that time was the kingly line of David. Now, the return to the land from Babylon. We're going to spend a little bit of time. We're going to spend a little time in Ezra, but I'm going to. I have to bounce to Isaiah and Jeremiah just a little bit to make a point. So, if you want, turn to the book of Ezra, Ezra chapter 1. And we're going to look at Ezra's account of them going back into Babylon. Going back into the land from Babylon. So in Ezra chapter 1, verse 1. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the word of Yah by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, Yah stirred up the spirit of Cyrus the king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, we're going to hold off on what he's saying right there. I want you to hold your finger right there. And in Isaiah, I want to take a closer look at Cyrus before we get into the rest of what Ezra has to say. Isaiah chapter 44. We're going to be in Isaiah 44, verses 24 through 45:6. Isaiah chapter 44, picking it up in verse 24. Thus says Yah, your Redeemer, and he who formed you from the womb. I am Yah, who makes all things, who stretches out the heavens all alone, who spreads abroad the earth by myself, who frustrates the sign of the babblers and drives diviners mad, who turns wise men backwards and makes their knowledge foolishness, who confirms the word of his servant and performs the counsel of his messengers, who says to Jerusalem, you shall be inhabited, to the cities of Judah you shall be built, and I will raise up her waste places, who says to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up your rivers, and who says to Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure, saying to Jerusalem, you shall be built, and to the temple, your foundation shall be laid. Chapter 45, verse 1. Thus says Yah to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him and loose the armor of kings, to open before him the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut. Verse 2, I will go before you and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of bronze and cut the bars of iron. I will give you treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places, that you may know that I, Yah, will call you by your name, who will call you by your name, am the Elohim of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel my elect, I have even called you by your name. I have named you, though you have not known me. I am Yah, and there is no other. There is no Elohim besides me. I will gird you, though you have not known me. And verse 6, that they may know from the rising of the sun to its setting that there is none besides me. I am Yah, and there is no other. Now I want to lay down a few measuring sticks for that, okay? At the time, just so we can get an idea of how much time elapsed between the time that Yah said this through the prophet Isaiah and the time that Cyrus gave the command, okay? Isaiah prophesied roughly 740 to 700 BC. He was prophesying when Uzziah was king, all the way down through Hezekiah being king. When Yah said this about Cyrus, Jerusalem hadn't fallen yet. In fact, Babylon wasn't even a power yet. They weren't a dominant empire at this time. Now Cyrus was born about 600 BC. That's when he was born. And he captured Babylon around 539 BC. He issued the decree allowing the Jews to return and rebuild the temple in Ezra 1, which we just read. And that was the time frame in Ezra 1 there. So it's around 539 BC. Okay? So if we took, that's about 150 years. If we start with this being a new year on the Gregorian calendar, is 2026, we go back 150 years, that brings us back to 1876. Less than 20 years after the Civil War. Okay?
How many years? What?
150.
150 years from what? 539 BC?
No, if you go 150 years from 2026, where it is right now, if you go backwards 150 years, it brings you to 1876. And the Civil War was in the 1860s, right? Okay. Can you imagine somebody predicting the name of somebody from the Civil War time frame, predicting somebody in 2025? Donald Trump is going to be president, predicted back in, not predicted, because Yah didn't predict it. He said it was going to be done. All right? Cyrus's great-grandfather and grandfather were probably alive, maybe his great-great-grandfather about that time. But I don't know that any of them had a Cyrus in mind. My point is, it's a long, long time, longer than man could accomplish anything in, especially during this time frame. And he's called him out by name, he's called him out by position. Because he's not only going to be Cyrus, he's not only going to be a male, he's going to be Cyrus, and he's going to be a leader, a king. It's all told beforehand. And we shouldn't be surprised, because in Isaiah 46, 9 and 10, remember the former things of old, for I am Elohim, and there is no other. I am Elohim, and there's none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, from the ancient times to things that are not yet. and so my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So Isaiah makes it very clear that a long time before Cyrus ever came into being, Yah had called him his servant. He had called him, let me go back and look at that. Was it his servant? His anointed. Thus Yah said to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held. He called it out long beforehand. Jeremiah mentions what's about to happen at this time, but he doesn't mention Cyrus by name. I'll read this. You don't have to turn there. Jeremiah chapter 25, verses 12 through 14. Then it will come to pass, when 70 years are completed, that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquities, says Yah, and I will make their make it a perpetual desolation. So I will bring on that land all my words, which I have pronounced against it, all that is written in this book, which Jeremiah has prophesied concerning all the nations. For the nations and great kings shall be served by them also, and I will repay them according to their deeds and according to their works of their own hands. He's talking about tearing down Babylon right there, right? And who did that? Cyrus did. Cyrus did. So we got two witnesses from a couple different angles, and we got Ezra, and Daniel also mentioned something about it in Daniel 10. I didn't write that down in here. But now if we return back to Ezra, and pick up what Ezra's got going on here. In verse 1, Ezra said, now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of Yah by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. That's what we just read in Jeremiah 25. He's going to wipe out Babylon. Yah stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia so that he made a proclamation and all the kingdom and put it in writing, saying, verse 2, thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, and all kingdoms of the earth, let me try that again in English. All the kingdoms of the earth, Yahweh Elohim of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me. He has commanded me, this is Cyrus talking, to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Verse 3, who is among you of all his people? May his Elohim be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of Yahweh Elohim of Israel. He is Elohim, which is in Jerusalem. And whoever is left in any place where he dwells, let the men of his place help him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, besides the free will offerings for the house of Elohim, which is in Jerusalem. Then the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, with all whose spirits Elohim had moved, arose to go up and build the house of Yah, which is in Jerusalem. And all those who were around them encouraged them with the articles of silver and gold and goods and livestock, with the precious things, besides all that of the willingly offered. King Cyrus also brought out the articles of the house of Yah, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from Jerusalem and he had put in the temple of his gods. And Cyrus, king of Persia, brought them out by the hand of Mithredath, the treasurer, and counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. So Cyrus is carrying this out. He's given the proclamation for them to go back into the land and to build the temple and rebuild Jerusalem. Like God said, like Elohim said was going to happen way back in Isaiah. All right? So Israel went back into the land under Ezra and Zerubbabel, but it was directed by Yah through Cyrus. It was planned way before Cyrus was born, and in fact, if you zoom out far enough, you'll find out it was planned before Isaiah prophesied it. It was planned from the foundation of the earth. Yah's still on his plan. He hasn't gotten off course. He's still right where in perfect time with what he has planned. Ezra was a scribe, and he was instrumental in leading the people back to Torah and giving Torah the prominence once they got back into the land. In fact, I think it was Ezra that stood up and did the reading, if I remember correctly. All right. Zerubbabel was not taken, he didn't go by accident either. That's the kingly line that was kept track of from, all the way back to Abraham. And Matthew confirms that, because in Matthew chapter 1, when he gives the genealogy of Yeshua, he starts with Abraham, right? And he brings up King David, okay? Because he's tying Yeshua to the line of King David and also back to Abraham. And in verse 11 of Matthew chapter 1, it reads like this: Josiah begot Jeconiah and his brothers about the time they were carried away to Babylon. So this tells us the kingly line that went, it was Josiah and Jeconiah and his brothers, and they were carried away to Babylon. And after that, after they were brought to Babylon, Jeconiah begot Shealtiel, and Shealtiel begot Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel, that's the same Zerubbabel that's going back, begot Abiud. Abiud begot Eliakim, and Eliakim begot Azor, and so on and so forth. The genealogy goes down to Yeshua. So we see the kingly line was preserved even through the exile of Babylon. Let me see. Now, this is where it gets interesting. When they get back into the land, and we're gonna take this slower. This is just a preview right now. In a few weeks, we'll be going through this a little bit slower. But once the remnant of Judah gets back into the land, note with me that they don't have any rule. They're still under the rule of Persia, okay? But think about this. They're going back into the land that was given to them by Yah. Then they don't have any control over that land. Okay? Now, Yah gave them to build Jerusalem and to build the temple, and that was important because it comes in handy many years down the road. Fits right into what Yah's planned. All right? They're subject to Cyrus, and eventually they're subject to others. It's not just the Persians. However, they're instructed to build the temple and to rebuild Jerusalem. And when they get in there, they begin sacrifices. Then they build the temple, and although the temple is smaller and it's not as beautiful as it was, and some of those that you couldn't tell what was going on when they finally completed it, because some people were cheering because the temple was built, and some were saying this is a disaster. It's nothing like the original temple was. Nothing. So they were disappointed. And I want you to notice, you go back and you read the story of the second temple being built, and the glory of Yah does not come down on that temple like it did when Solomon's temple was built. That's very important. You're seeing Yah return his people to this land under his protection, but not with his presence going with them. And I'm saying that because the glory did not come down upon the temple like it did with Solomon's temple. So by this time, the priesthood is weakened, but it's gaining a little bit more steam now because we've got a temple again, but it's defiled. It's weakened at the least. Defiled is, if not here, by the time we get to Yeshua, it's definitely defiled. But the kingly line is preserved. Now, there's 400 years of silence. Meaning, you don't see the hand of Yah move for like 400 years. This is similar to coming out of Egypt, but listen to the key differences. It was in a foreign land in Egypt, a land that wasn't theirs, where they were being afflicted for that 400 years. Here, it's the very land that they had been promised. And they're being suppressed by the Persians, by the Greeks, by the Romans. They're under the rule of others. Now, by this time, the Pharisees have kind of limited the priesthood a little bit, or put them in check, however you want to say it. They're teaching Torah, and they're out amongst the people. I like the way that you put that. They are out amongst the people, and the people are okay with that. And they're getting Torah, but they're getting Torah that's mixed with a bunch of traditions. And it's we see when Yeshua comes on the scene, we see just how cattywampus things are. He has to straighten a lot of things out like that. But eventually, Yah speaks. He speaks through the birth of 2 male children. And John the Baptist being the first, and we know the story of that, how Zacharias in his time happened to come up for him to offer the incense. He had I don't know, perhaps he was, the angel said his prayer was heard. Was he praying at that time for a son? Was he thinking back to Abraham and saying, well, you did it with Abraham, I know you can do it? Was that, I don't know his mindset. Maybe if John, I'm not old enough, but maybe if John was here, he could clue us in a little bit, but he's not here. So, but he had faith, he had confidence, and he was, I have to assume, by the way that the angel said, your prayer has been answered, Elizabeth is going to have a child, is going to have a son. Okay? And that's an identical pattern to Abraham and Sarah is going on here. That womb has been dead. There has been no child for their whole life, and they're up in their years. But we see Yah's hand moving again. And then we see Yeshua come on the scene. And we begin to see, we're a result. We sitting in this room are a result of that. So John the Baptist and Yeshua come on, and we get beyond 70 AD. Well, wait a minute. Let's back up first. Yeshua is crucified and rises again at the age of 30, 33. There's a lot of debate about that, okay? But 40 years later, in 70 AD, the second temple is torn down. Is that 40 years a testing of Judah as the leadership to accept the Messiah that was sent to them? They were given 40 years to accept the work of Yah that many of them saw firsthand. And now Yeshua's disciples are spreading that like wildfire. Yah's giving 40 years for that young planting of the 12 apostles to grow, and also as a witness to who is Judah supposed to be? Judah's supposed to be the leaders. They're in their land, they're the leadership, and from the time that Yeshua was resurrected until the temple was torn down completely and Judah was scattered all over the face of the planet was 40 years of testing. Just like it took 40 years of testing to get from the mountain to the land, they were 40 years of testing in the land and then got booted. Interesting. Patterns sometimes, it struck me as really, I thought it was awesome as a student of the word. I thought, wow, this is when you really begin to read in context and in flow as a story, this stuff just astounds you sometimes. So, Judah's scattered for a long time, long time. In fact, that 150 years we talked about with Cyrus, that gets blown out of the water with what happens next, because Judah's thrown from the land and nothing happens until 1948. Many of the, what?
1890.
1890?
1897 is when it was declared that they would be back in the land in 70 years.
Oh, is that right? Okay, I didn't catch that. Okay, thank you for the input. Okay, so 1897. But 1897 minus 70 is still a lot more than 150 years. I mean, it took a long time. And a lot of people had given up. They thought this prophecy is never going to be fulfilled. They're never going to be back in the land. But this is where I want you to put your thinking caps on. And this is going to ruffle some feathers, but that's okay, because it's good for us to have our feathers ruffled every once in a while and cause us to get into the Word and think about what Yah is saying versus often what we think He's saying. Which entry into the land does the 1940 entry, which one does it more closely resemble? The one led by Joshua or the one led by Cyrus?
You want an answer?
Yeah,
Cyrus.
exactly. Because it was not Joshua, and who are we expecting to lead us into the land? Yeshua, right? And it wasn't Yeshua that led them into the land. But you see, Yah not only allowed, He raised Cyrus up to do just that. Did that happen again in 1948? I think it did. And why did it happen in Cyrus's time? It was in preparation for a future work of Yah. Why did it happen in 1948? Because it's in preparation of a future work that Yah's going to do. That has to be in place before He can do this. So He does this first, and then He does this work at a future date. I'm not date setting. I don't know when He's going to do it, but I know He's setting up for it. I've pretty much zipped through what I had here. But the way I see it is we're all waiting for Yah to speak again. Maybe not John the Baptist being born, or maybe not Yeshua being born and raised. But do I think the book of Acts could come back to life? I absolutely do think that the house of Israel will be recognized. I believe that we're going to see things taking place. That's going to be what we see. We're going to see things taking place similar to those things that took place in the book of Acts. The hand of Yah moving amongst us, all throughout the world. I think the house of Israel is going to be recognized globally. And I think we will see healings, miracles, the things that took place in the book of Acts again. And I'm going to stop there. I'm going to say, does anybody have any questions or any comments? David, I thank you for that. I'm 1890, you said?
Well, it was 97, it was Herzl made the prediction.
1897. Okay, I'm going to research that. And
1897 AD? Yes.
1897. Yeah,
What happened? Do you know
Herzl he was a Zionist, and made a prophecy or prediction that the Jews would be back in the land within 70 years, and they'd become a nation.
It happened in May 14, 1948.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
When they became recognized by the leadership of the world, so to speak. Not everybody recognized them,
Right.
but the important ones did recognize them as a nation.
And that opened the door for where we're at today. So, okay, so I thought that to be very interesting. We'll get into it a little bit in a little bit more detail as we go down further, because I want to point out some of the things that how Yeshua ties back to so many of these different things. He's not just the king, he's the prophet, and over and over and over. This is all, none of it's new to you, but hopefully when we're going through it like this, it just kind of, I get more excited each time I read through the scripture. I'm on my 14th time, by the way, and I finished 2 Samuel this morning. So, and I pick up more every time I go through it. I enjoy it. I really have a passion for this. I do. So next week, we're going to go back outside the land, and we're going to pick things up with familiar territory again. We're going to talk about this gal named Esther and Mordecai and this guy named Haman. And it's interestingly enough, we won't see, and this is not a surprise to any of you either, we won't see Yah's name mentioned in the book of Esther. But we're going to see Yah's fingerprints all over that story. All over it. All right? And it's my hope that you guys are seeing the pattern. Because really, what I really want you to see is Yah's in control on both sides of this equation. That's the key. He's in control on both sides. So with no other questions or comments, any others? All right, it's time to. Thank you, sir.